Good evening, everyone. I'm so excited that you've joined us for another episode of Reawaken Your Brilliance. So I was thinking, this weekend I got in trouble on Facebook, and this has only happened one other time before, and I get very passionate about certain issues, and a friend of mine who actually is a radio jockey in my hometown had posted a question about Joe Paterno. Now, there are 1,000 different ways we could go with this one, but the larger point that I want to bring out about the discussion was, people kind of jumped on me and said, he did all these good things and he didn't molest the children. And my point was people failed at all levels. But people were able to better articulate it at the end of the argument. But they said, if one child's molested, then that affects all of us. And my larger point is that we're all connected. Even if it's not your child, because that was the impression I was getting from the feed, that, well, you know what, we didn't know them, and it's sad, but he helped all these other kids. But when you harm someone, that indirectly or directly affects you. I've said before, as I heal, you heal, and it's the same as if we do harm to someone. If we do harm to someone else, it also harms ourselves. So just as you're going about your night or tomorrow, think about that and think how we're all connected and what you can do to move that connectivity in a more positive direction. So we're going to tell you about tonight's guest, Tatiana Irvin, and I'm bringing up her bio now. Tatiana H. Irvin is a natural energy intuitive that has been serving her clients for over 15 years, utilizing metaphysical coaching techniques and energy balancing tools. Through fine-tuned intuitive coaching sessions, coupled with supportive states of expanded personal awareness, each client is supported to grow in consciousness, balance, and clarity of genuine purpose, assisting the client to recognize their own intuition and shift the frequency of energy in their bodies, homes, and businesses. Each client is empowered to make tremendous strides in intentional manifestation. Tatiana holds a master's degree in metaphysical science, energy leadership certification from IPEC, medical intuitive certification, and various supporting certificates and energy awareness modalities. She's currently completing her PhD in metaphysics and authoring a book addressing the more profound aspects and stories of her work. Tatiana is a public speaker, teacher of energy leadership workshops, and founder of the holistic professionals network Heal the Healer. Welcome, Tatiana.
Tatiana, go ahead. I'm going to disconnect and call back. Something is going wrong.
Well, guys, what can I say? It's been one of those kind of days. Crazy day. I forgot Tatiana's bio, so I don't have it on my cards. And sometimes
it'll be just fine.
Sometimes it happens. But luckily, we have Amnon here to be able to take care of all technical issues. But I'm really excited about having Tatiana tonight because she's a medical intuitive. And I first remember reading Carolyn Myss. I always heard it was pronounced Mace, but it's spelled M-Y-S-S, book on being a medical intuitive. And that's when I first became fascinated with it. And when I was introduced to Tatiana, I was really excited because I was like, wow, someone in Raleigh who does that. So we were thrilled to have her on the show. Can we hear her now?
I think I'm here, Julie.
Yay!
And gratitude for allowing me to share with you on the show tonight. Sorry we had a little techno glitch there, apparently.
That's all right. I've got a little bit of a gift of gab, so we were able to cover. So
great.
First, I want you to explain to people, because they might not know, what exactly is a medical intuitive?
A medical intuitive is really nothing more than an energy intuitive with an emphasis to look for energy in the body. And we already know through quantum physics and so many advancements that we've been able to make recently in acknowledging that everything is nothing but energy fields and a whole lot of intelligent energy holding it together in between. There's just layers of energy, lighter layers of energy and denser layers of energy that make up what we physically see as ourselves. And so when I use the term medical intuitive, that's become kind of coined and popular by Carolyn Mace, many people are familiar with her. What it really is about is fine-tuning and honing in on the energy that we all share, that we all coexist in, and being able to determine in the body where there may be imbalances that are looking for opportunities to be cleared and corrected and be brought back into balance again.
That's a much better definition that I could have ever given. But what I'm excited about, because I don't think I've quite heard it defined like that, but I think you really did a good job. Because, Dr. Oz has said energy medicine is the next frontier. And this is a classically trained physician who's in a big hospital in New York who's saying, look, it's real. It does exist.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that there's been a lot of respect recently by leaders in the medical field, and I refer to that generally as allopathic medicine. I lean more towards the holistic end, just because to me that's exciting and that's my calling. It's a blend of the two. We're gifted by having the idea of healing from without, addressing the physical body from the external, and really holistic medicine, particularly energy medicine, is all about acknowledging the finer energy that makes up what we are and healing from within, and seeing where the play of thought and emotion and habituated ways of being is creating in the body, so that the body starts to demonstrate the symptomology that sends us off to the doctor, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Now, I want to remind all our listeners that you can call in and ask Tatiana a question at 919-518-9773 or Skype in Computers 2K Voice, and I will be monitoring the chat room. So if you have a question, do not hesitate. She's nice, and she doesn't bite, and she promises to answer. So
Absolutely.
Would you consider... because we've touched on energy, is a medical intuitive psychic, or is that the wrong term because you read and interpret energy?
Psychic is a correct term. It's one that a lot of energy intuitives may shy away from, just because it's been used and abused a bit in society, and certainly by classic debunkers. But in truth, psychic ability is nothing more than intuitive ability, and all of us have it. Some of us spend more time working on it, and we refine it as a tool. And that is certainly the case in my practice. And the certification and entrainment that I went through to be an actual certified medical intuitive very much focused on projecting that intuitive ability in the shared space that you even mentioned earlier at the beginning of the show. We all are sharing space. What affects one affects the other. Well, when we look at energy in that quantum way, where you end and I begin really doesn't have strong definition. We can't see the defining lines. And so that being said, a medical intuitive, an energy intuitive can project with permission into the client's space and be able to help see what maybe the client is less aware of because they haven't worked on the same intuitive abilities.
So then prior to working with someone, or when they come into your office, do you ask their higher self or ask them permission? Just because you mentioned that, how does that work?
Absolutely, always. There needs to be a very impeccable level of trust and respect, and I do very much ascribe to the concept of my client's higher self, and even additional spiritual guidance that very often, very humbly for me, shows up and wants to participate in the session. And so, yes, with that trust and with the participation of the client, I find that we are able to shift things in a very major way.
Now, since you touched on it briefly, I also would like you to tell us, because you've been trained to be a medical intuitive. So what's the training process for that? You go to school, you become certified? Because again, I think not a lot of people know about this. They'd want to know, okay, well, how did you learn this? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I can, and I can speak for myself personally. Carolyn Mace, who again is very well known, felt that a lot of that ability came to her, and I respect that there are many, many out there that just have felt drawn to use that kinship that they feel when they're in someone else's field, and can pick up on some emotions, sometimes can pick up on some blocks and some derision, to be able to narrow it down to energy blocks in the body that may manifest physically. For me, I really wanted to have training behind my name, and wanted to have a skill set that I believed that could be replicable. And so I located a a woman that had come up with her own system, had created her own credentialed school out of Boulder, Colorado. Her name is Dr. Judy Miller Dienst, and it's the Mystery School out of Boulder, Colorado. And looked around the country and looked around the world to see what programs were out there, and I felt very drawn to work with her. And in the process of doing that, it was really quite fabulous, because when you recognize that there is no defining lines between ourselves and those that we're sharing space with, you can become that much more aware of the emotions, the mindset, even some of the thoughts and what's going on in the thought field of those that you're sharing time with in the classroom. So we did a lot of experimentation with actually taking our focus and our perceptions and trading spaces with other classmates. We would literally project our consciousness into their mind, and they would trade spaces with us, and we could start to tell each other what we were seeing, even in just the thought field. That was one of the pieces.
Wow, that's really interesting. And you know, I didn't know, because I wondered about that. I thought, is there a school where you can go to? Because until meeting you, Carolyn Mace was the only person that I ever knew that did that. You know, I had a book, and I just didn't know anyone that had done that for a living. So why don't you explain to people, and I'd want to stress, and if I'm wrong, correct me, that with each individual, there's going to be a different thing and a different experience. For instance, Tatiana, before having her on the show, said, come on in, let me show you what it's all about. And I was like, my knees hurt. But that wasn't the direction that we ended up going into. So I'm going to assume that every individual client that you work with takes a different path. Like if someone might come in and be like, my knees hurt, and you're like, okay, and you kind of delve into that. We kind of got into a little more emotional and thought things that were going on with my life. So can you kind of walk us through the process if someone were going to come to you, how that would work the first time they saw you?
Sure, and this is going to be fun, because the truth of the matter is I have to sit very much with zero expectation of how a session is going to go until I actually have the client in my office, and we've established the rapport that allows us to not only do a little bit of what I refer to as intuitive intake. I ask a series of questions. I'm never quite sure what those questions are going to be until I have the client in that space, and I can start to pick up on pings coming off of their energy field. I've always been able to see the auric field with my eyes visually, and it was just one of those things as a little girl in church I picked up on early and thought everybody was watching the auras of the speakers up at the pulpit. But I'm watching for everything from color and texture and vibratory frequency change. When they hit on something that they realize appears to be connected to what they're there for, that maybe they hadn't stepped into a realization before. And after we go through that intuitive intake, we really know where to take that particular session, because we really don't want to deal with all of the aches and pains and issues that they may have had over the past decade or so. We want to deal with what's manifest in the moment, because energy can shift so impeccably and so quickly. The body's meant to heal itself. We know that, we experience that, and when it gets glitchy, it's a matter of how do we help it unlock that self-healing ability again. So with you and the knees, very much so, we stepped into it with the open understanding that if that is where cause can be found, that is going to be where your energy field, where guidance is going to direct us. And actually, there were more somatic causes, or I should say mental emotional pieces or components that were leading to some physical blocks in the body. And we felt drawn to clear those first, or to explore those first, so that your intuition was really participatory in allowing the body to step back into self-healing.
So once, and we can use me as an example, so you kind of do ask the questions, kind of see, you're looking for the energy and what's going on with that. So then would you say is the next step energy healing? Are you using a certain modality to help release the blocks? What goes on next?
Absolutely. Medical intuitive certification training was one piece of the modalities. Every practitioner out there has their own natural draw to what modalities they want to use. As you mentioned earlier in the bio, I have a master's and I'm completing my PhD in metaphysics. That really is an expansive amount of education to be able to apply a really large awareness as to how to work with maybe Reiki energy, energy medicine tools, chakra balancing, respecting that people's spiritual beliefs that may or may not have been theirs to begin with, but were something that they picked up along the way through family or just life entrainment comes and filters in, and I know how to ask specific questions. I'm also a clinical aromatherapist, so using a handful of these different tools and picking up on what the body's asking for, what's beautiful is guidance will say, here's the tools that are needed right now. And it's always going to be very specific to the client and very specific to their needs in that moment. If ever I find that there is recommendations or suggestions past what is available to me as a practitioner. The beauty is that very often I have within my network of holistic healthcare practitioners, others that I can refer the client to, that I have a very intimate testimony of their services because I've experienced them and can refer the client elsewhere. And sometimes it's time to refer the client back to the doctor and get something x-rayed or have a full scan provided for them that is far more allopathic.
And I want to remind everyone who's listening, if you have a question for Tatiana, actually, Tatiana, we already have a question for you on chat, but I want to remind everyone, if you chat in a question, I will ask Tatiana, or you can call in at 919-518-9773, or I know we have people all over the world listening, so save a dime and Skype in at Computers 2K Voice. Warrior Spirit would like to know, can I call in and get a reading?
I don't typically do readings, and to be honest, it's really because I very much respect that everyone's energy field is changing from moment to moment, and what your needs are may not necessarily be what your focus is in the moment. That's why it's so very raw and new and vulnerable when a client comes in and works with me. Trying to jump into something in the spur of the moment and perform leads, in my experience, to grappling for those that would be intuitive to try to give a quick and ready answer. And so if ever there is a desire or an interest to communicate with me privately, I would prefer that someone send me an email, and I would be very honored to work with you. But random readings over Skype and through this radio method, I think takes away from the quality and the quantity of what can be provided elsewhere.
And we have Tatiana's website there when she's up on the screen, so if you want to contact her Warrior Spirit, you will be able to do so.
Please do.
So Tatiana, one thing that you did that I don't think I've seen, and someone out there is going to say, yes, you've done it with me, but I thought was really interesting that you bring in prior, as we're going over the questions kind of in the assessment, is what I would consider coaching, and
yes,
kind of how you bring that as well into the healing and kind of as you're reading energy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I was very drawn to do the coaching piece because I came to find when I worked with energy medicine, energy healing practitioners during my early years, there could be the tendency towards codependence with a practitioner and believing that only they had the answers, and that, I need to get clarity on what's going on with my body. This is a power outside myself. I need again to go and see my Reiki master. I need to go and see, the person who tunes in. I genuinely respect, and I mean hugely respect, that every single one of us is intuitive. And the entire premise behind coaching, as opposed to consulting or any other form of providing advice, is that the client absolutely has the inherent wisdom to any question, any level of understanding that they're seeking, and that a truly well-trained coach that is leading from that place of respect for the client is going to be drawn to ask the right questions to bring the answers through the client. And so I'm always trying to leave my clients far more empowered, so that rather than being dependent upon me, they grow through the experience.
I love that. But, it's interesting. I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine from Los Angeles the other day, and we were talking, and I was like, we can use these tools that we know. And he said, but you know what? It's so hard when it's yourself. Sometimes you can look at someone else and say, hey, oh my gosh, and like what you do, kind of get cut through the crap and get right to it. But do you have any suggestions for people? What would help us get neutral to help bring out that intuitiveness, those right answers that we know that are inside? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I believe that every coach needs a coach. I believe that every coach I know has one, because we are subjective. And being very honest, I'm subjective about myself as well. I work very diligently to keep my energy as impeccably clean as I possibly can for my clients, but also for myself, so that I can tap into my own guidance, call them by name when it's appropriate, and say, I really want clarity on this particular piece. But we are here not to be an island. Mm-hmm. We really are here to be of service to one another. And a big reason why I've chosen to network with other practitioners is because I believe that for us to be the most clear conduit as healing practitioners, and to be absolutely in our A game at being impeccable of taking care of our own selves so that we're living by example, we do need to work with others. So if we're looking for tools, by all means, allow yourself to be drawn to a modality that serves you. Like I might have mentioned, I'm a Reiki master. I was drawn to Reiki. Clinical aromatherapy, I wanted a hands-on tool for body, mind, and spirit. If any individual is drawn to a particular healing modality that really speaks to their soul, work with that, and then find another professional that you can bounce some of your strengths and weaknesses off of in moments of subjectivity, where you can get greater clarity, because they are there to support and serve you as well.
It's because I know Tatiana, I can say this, and it's interesting. I would love to know how other people feel, or it's different seeing her on Skype, but she has amazing energy. When the first time I re-met her, she was kind, said, "Oh, we've met before," and I was like, a little ungrounded, but she has such incredible, you can tell when you meet her that she's a healer, and I think that just really comes through. But since you mentioned it, you're very passionate about this, so explain to us what Heal the Healer is, and your network, and why you started it, and what the purpose of that is. Just go in a little more detail so people understand what that is.
Okay. Thank you. I'm really honored to share it, because it's something I'm really growing and developing and passionate about. When I reestablished my practice in North Carolina, I wanted to find a home base that felt supportive of the work that I was doing, and also was going to give me opportunities to continue to experience services that I knew kept me in my most fit and in a state of wellness. And I was able to team up, for lack of a better word, with a handful of really talented massage therapists. And they had various abilities with the techniques that they used, as well as their own levels of intuition that filtered in. And I said, well, let's trade. Let's trade amongst ourselves. And this is a common concept. This exists in many different industries, and certainly exists amongst healing practitioners. But what we came to find is that it evolved. And I found myself reaching out to chiropractors and cranial sacral therapists and healing touch therapists and you name it, it seemed physical therapists, and it kind of grew and expanded into working with several different practitioners. And then we started to share amongst the names that were within that database, recognizing that even when some of the modalities that we practiced within our individual businesses, our individual practices crossed over, there was not a competitive spirit that existed. There was such collaboration and camaraderie that we were really walking our talk and honing in on keeping our health and our vitality and the example that we were setting for our clients in integrity with ourselves. And then in the process of doing that, we could refer one another, not from a place, again, of hoarding or competition and how do I keep my practice running if I'm referring, to other practitioners that are similar to me. It really was a gift that we could get greater clarity. We could serve the clients more completely. And we also were able to magnify the other practitioners' sense of abundance, that there is enough for all of us. There's so many people waking up to wanting to embrace health and wholeness and vitality in a much more expanded way. It created a sense of abundance and clarity and affluence that healed on a completely different level.
I so appreciate that. As a small business owner, I think it's so important. And I mean, when I first started my business, in the area that I am, I was kind of amazed at the competitiveness that was there. And it wasn't and it was a more passive aggressive competitiveness. But, I found I would be like, oh my gosh, I got to clean my aura. Like, it just affected me. And I wouldn't say that I'm someone that's very sensitive, but so even if you're aware or sensitive to it, it still can affect you. So I truly appreciate that you've started that with healers. And something you'd mentioned at one point during our conversation is how you work very hard to keep your own energy clean, which I think is so important. And that sometimes people who are healers or intuitives need to do more. And I just think that that's wonderful. Now, if someone's interested in learning about it, is it just in the Raleigh area? If they want to learn more, where can they go to find out more information?
Are you referring to Heal the Healer?
Yes, sorry, Heal the Healer.
Heal the Healer is in a state of evolution, but right now we have a Facebook group page, and that is open to all practitioners that are established in their field and have great references that we will be able to work with them and also gain an intimate referral by doing trades within that practice. And that group page is easily visible if you look at Heal the Healer on there. And then there's also healthehealer.org, which is a new website that we just recently put up. And through that website and through other social media, there's been articles written and some blogging done that has inspired through LinkedIn. There's been a handful of platforms. Other holistic healthcare practitioners in Arizona, out into the West, and as far as Switzerland that have said, hey, this sounds great. How do we get back into this mindset of abundance and that there is enough for all of us and that practitioners don't need to be running their wells dry, nor do they need to be coming from a place of lack and how do I make my name out there and become financially viable. Let's do this as a team. Let's build a community. Let's collaborate and create health and abundance for all of us.
So it's anyone can contact you. It's not no geographical restrictions.
Sure, absolutely. Anyone who's interested in information and wants to look at the website and would like to direct an email to myself or my co-founder, Kathleen O'Grady, we are very open and engaged in answering questions and seeing what we can do to expand this concept further.
But I think it's great. I mean, you and I both moved here from Los Angeles, and I know when I moved here, I didn't know anyone. I mean, I was interested in this stuff, and it was kind of going about and finding it. So I think that that's a great resource. So we appreciate you putting that together.
Thank you.
So I want you to talk a little bit about when I was doing some research and trying to understand what a medical intuitive is. Can you talk about what scanning is and why you do that?
Sure. That is not specifically a part of the training that I experienced as a medical intuitive. It kind of came to me naturally. And I think that anyone that continues to develop their intuitive abilities will find that certain aspects of their intuition come far faster and far stronger. And I see that in my clients, and when they embrace it and reach out for it, I help them to fine tune that through that support. For me, I have taken the ability to take my hands above the energy field, the auric field, if you will, the more etheric and fine energy of my client, and with my eyes closed and in the safe and very comfortable space of having them in my office and laying comfortably on the massage table, be able to pick up on energy through my hands. And it's not an uncommon thing. It just happens to be another piece of my practice that assists me in being able to read where there is disharmony or whether the frequency and the texture of their energy finds a place where it is too intense, where it's calling for my internal vision, because I scan with my eyes closed, and I can also see auric energy and work with the tools as a medical intuitive to go through the layers of the thought field, the mind field, the auric field, and then into the level of the body where we're into tissue, musculature, the skeletal system, vascular flow. And then from there, it is, where are we finding any discordance? Is it lighter, more etheric energy? Is it a mental block that looks like it's hovering over the colon, for instance? Is there some strife that's going on in the intimate relationship of my client that is blocked in their sacrum, that's keeping creative flow and passion from being in their life, that may now be manifesting perhaps as a flare-up or an infection in their, reproductive or their sexual organs. That's really how the energy flows. And through hovering my hands over the body, the energy of the body gets my attention. And I start to hover there until I can get a visual picture or some sense or some dialogue from the body, and perhaps also my client's guidance as to what is looking to reveal itself. And again, always with the participation of the client, letting them know when it's appropriate, what I'm seeing and what I'm sensing, because their awareness of it is tremendously healing and expansive for them in making the changes to let whatever go is ready to be moved out of their field.
Now, I just want to remind everyone, if you have a question for Tatiana, you can call in at 919-518-9773 or Skype in at Computers 2K Voice, and I'm monitoring the chat room. I'd like you now to talk a little bit about, I think finally we're at this at a place where people understand that there is a connection between emotion and disease. I mean, Louise Hay, that great book, You Can Heal Your Life, and she has a little chart in the back that says if, you're having an issue in this area, a little positive mantra to help with that. And I think for me was the first person that I ever read any of this on. So can you talk to us a little bit about the connection of energy to an emotion or an event that causes an illness? And you've talked about it, but just maybe you could use an example of something maybe that happened to someone and maybe how the energy gets stuck or what it looks like and how you can help move that out. Is that making sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's even the smallest things, Julie, and a lot of us may take it for granted. With Louise Hay, she just opened up the whole door to being able to understand what the body and its various operations, its major systems, its organs, our appendages, our digits, what they have a tendency to represent, so that we have kind of a baseline or a roadmap to be able to say, all right, I have a client who has a constant problem maybe with an uncomfortable nerve that runs down the left side of their body from the top of shoulder all the way down to the fingertips. If I have the client come in and tell me that they're aware of that, I might start asking questions, for instance, based on some of the work that Louise Hay has done and many, many others that have followed her and also come before her, and find out a little bit more about their female relationships. And if it appears that female relationships may not necessarily open up any doors of awareness for the client or for myself, then there may be some questions along the lines of, how are they feeling in their own feminine power? How have they ever felt in their own feminine power and their ability to tap into their own intuitive wisdom? And when I'm dealing with a client that perhaps has been a real wonderful, powerful power broker, a female in the corporate world, who has felt that for her to be properly respected, for instance, and to be seen and to maintain credibility, she needs to play kind of a patriarchal model, a masculine, engaging model of connecting with others in her field. She's running a lot of right body energy, which is masculine energy, a lot of direct contact energy. That's all about energy going out. It's all about engagement. It's somewhat confrontive, but not necessarily in a bad way. But left is really subtlety. It's about receiving. It's about tapping into our quiet, intuitive wisdom. It's about just really being still long enough to be able to take the best of what we know academically, educationally, intellectually, and also what our internal wisdom knows about ourselves and some of that soulful wisdom, put that all together, and then really from a place of heart and integral wisdom make choices that are complete and whole and are really going to serve that individual. So just to use that as a perfect example, the client may not recognize that they're not honoring their feminine side, their intuitive side, and feeling that they're kind of not going to be respected there, they might have turned that off. And in the process of turning that off over maybe a decade, 15 years of not really listening to that feminine side and not really working that internal spiritual muscle, now we've got a nerve that's just talking to the client. It's the body trying to complain that there is something that's out of harmony and out of balance. And should the client not pick up on that in a much more subtle form of communication, eventually it goes to the densest place of our being, which is our physical bodies. So it's my understanding, and it's been my experience working with clients and working for the many, many years that I've been involved in metaphysics and holistic and energy healing. Nothing shows up in the physical body first. It always has a lighter causal component in the spiritual, mental, or emotional field first.
Now, in working with someone, especially say, for instance, if there's been trauma, I'm assuming that it would be a process. For instance, they wouldn't walk in and you would just do so many things and give them so much information and do such a transformation of energy that they'd walk out with their head spinning. You know what I mean? That you put them like, oh my gosh, overload. Now I was maybe in this state, but that you get them into another state of shock at the other end of the spectrum. So is that something like, again, I believe this would be a process. Like, for instance, you're talking about the power person. That's something that maybe then the nerve might go away in a session, but it might be there are other underlying things all connected to that, that there'd be, do you know what I guess I'm trying to say? There are all these connections, and that's something that wouldn't be undone in one thing, and you would examine other things going on with that. Is that making sense?
Yeah. There very often are layers, and it really depends on how ready the client is when they show up in the office. That's why, again, when they may show up with a specific need, I will always very much stay open to wherever their highest energy as well as their guidance directs me. It's a perfect example that you'd say some can be overwhelmed. I had a wonderful client, and I have her permission to kind of, in complete respect of her, around the periphery of her particular issues, be able to share this so that it could be better understood. She was over 80 years old, and she had deep pain, ironically, on the left side of her body, since that's what we were just discussing. Very, very deep pain. In the process of doing some of the intuitive coaching and having her share with me what she knew about her physiological tendencies, as well as some unhealed emotions, we were able to understand that through the process of divorce, she had huge estrangement from her 4 children, that there was a great deal of guilt, that there was a lot of unhealed pain, that perhaps she should have done things differently, heavy regrets. And when I would work with this client, she would sometimes show up very, very ready to let go of enormous layers. I was always cautioned by her very present guidance when it was time to just gently back out of those layers and allow her to assimilate from a place that was comfortable to her, that didn't overwhelm her mentally, emotionally, and certainly never physically. But you could see when those layers would start to lift and arise in the client. Okay, here's where we need to respectfully seal the space and then perhaps allow some time for reflection and recuperation. And when she's ready, come back and we'll see what is ready to move through then.
Excellent. Now we have a great question from Loving Soul. What does disease and cancer look like energetically in the aura and in the body? Great question.
It is different for everyone. I would love to give you a pat answer, but I can't give you a pat answer because anything that manifests in any individual has its own signature from the individual. So yes, I have worked with clients that have had cancer, and I have worked with clients who have had the energy signature of what could eventually manifest as cancer. So I'll answer that question in 2 parts. A client that had a block that appeared to be right about mid-ascending colon and communicated itself as a block that had not necessarily found itself in the densest level of her physicality and needed to be looked at. And I referred her to a medical professional to go and get that scanned. It can look like the corresponding emotion for that individual. So blocks can, in this case, hers looked kind of like an insect, to be quite honest. It looked like it had appendages to it. It was dark. It was mostly black. You could feel an intelligence to that particular block. And it kind of hunkered down like it knew it had been seen. And sometimes things can feel neutral. In this case, hers felt like it was very comfortable there. Thank you very much. And I'd like to be left alone. And so making the client aware, this is the texture and this is the feel of this particular block. We could discuss at that point in the privacy of session some of the emotions that might have led to, and that she was certainly aware of, led to her possibly having issues with holding back memories, holding back some fears, being afraid to move forward in her life, and why there might be an energetic block in the colon.
And was this cancer that she had that you were seeing, or
it was
pre-cancer? Okay.
Yes. And clients that I've worked with that have had full-blown cancer, and in many cases has metastasized, there appears to be, when you look at the auric field, and there is some beautiful, really masterful work by an artist by the name of Alex Gray, who has written Sacred Mirrors and has put out some really beautiful artistry that I find it beautifully reflects a lot of what I see when I'm in my client's field and I'm looking at the aura, and I see the core of connectedness between the chakra fields and how those are interlinked with body systems and organs that are communicating. When you've got someone that has full-blown cancer, what I have seen is pits in their auric field. It's not smooth. It's not even. The texture is pitted or cored out. There's vulnerabilities in places where they may be leaking energy from heart chakra through the back of between the shoulder blades, and there's old pain there, and there's energy drain that's coming from there. And ironically, they may have developed cancer literally as perhaps a carcinoma on the skin, but that it's gone inside of the body and is moved to other places like the liver or the kidneys or the lymph. So the auric field, it's never going to be a classic look from one client to the other. Cancer looks like blank. Mm-hmm. It's always very specific and very individualistic. And just as much as it can manifest in the body, as the medical field has come to note, and allopathic medicine uses the term spontaneous remission, it can also disappear from the body. So the goal is, again, let's work with the energy, because if there is not a mental, emotional, spiritual energy equivalent of cancer in the client's field, the body can return to a state of health. It can move back into self-healing.
Well, that was an excellent question. Thank you, Loving Soul. So you have mentioned you do work with allopathic and other alternative medicine people. So whatever's best for the client, you're willing to work with people. I would think, and if you've worked on this or have thoughts on this, you would be very beneficial. I can't tell you how many friends I have had who for years have been trying to figure out what's going on, and then maybe discover, oh, I have Lyme disease, or I had a friend, she went through all this, and they said somehow when her father was with the military, was in South Korea, and they think she got some kind of virus or something as a 3 or 4-year-old that just, ended up causing Sjogren's and rheumatoid arthritis and a bunch of different things. So if someone who's been struggling for a while trying to figure out, okay, what's going on with me, is that something you can help with?
It is. I actually am working with a client right now that has Lyme's disease, and she has, and when I say that, I'm also very careful because I don't diagnose, and I also respect that while there are diagnoses out there, there is that beautiful, mysterious concept of spontaneous remission. The body can heal itself. And so I try not to hold too hard to a particular diagnosis, and again, look for, why is the body experiencing such a huge immunological shutdown? Why is it almost attacking itself in the joints? Why isn't the body fighting for itself right now? Where is the sadness in the body? Where is there a desire on the part of the client perhaps to disengage from the world, and perhaps is there overwhelm that's being experienced by them? Are they living a life true to themselves? And are they actually enjoying that life? Or are they living for someone else, and getting up every single day feels like drudgery to them, and therefore bit by bit, through thought, through emotion, through habituated ways of being, they start to create stiffness in the joints unintentionally. There's never any blame. There's never any judgment. It's simply, we can entrain our bodies to respond to the way that we're feeling And we know that we've heard that again and again. An attitude of gratitude, talk positively to yourself. It changes the way you feel. But what a lot of people don't realize is that how we speak to ourselves, both internally as well as vocally, is a direct command to the intelligent energy that we are. And our bodies are always listening. So if you get up in the morning and the first thing you talk to is your hips and the cellulite that's there, or the aging spots that are showing up on your face, and it comes from a place that's very judgmental and self-deprecating, you've just inadvertently commanded the cells of your hips and your fat cells, the skin, the texture, or if you're looking at your face, the smoothness and texture around the eyes and the mouth, and you've told it, yep, this is what you look like, this is what you are, and it continues to self-replicate. I talk sweet to my face every day. I talk sweet to any acne blemishes that break out. Thank you very much for letting me know some cleansing may be required. But I might have had an attitude yesterday, and I just love it right back into a place of being healthful again. So it's a regular practice of realizing how much power we have to direct how our bodies respond to us.
I think that's such an excellent point, Tatiana, because I especially think in our society, you know, what we see and are bombarded with daily is we are not pretty enough unless we have the body of a 12-year-old boy, unless we, you know, as thin as we can be. And that's really tough. I mean, I think laughing at saying it, some of that, and I've gotten over the cellulite. I'm like, hey, you're just there, have at it. But, you know, I think of how much of my life, especially when I was younger, that I'd be like, oh, I hate my stomach. And I'm like, dang, I would take you back in a second now. You weren't bad at all. And, you know, just how it's almost like it becomes ingrained. And I think that we, you know, and I see it in men too, because I think the pressure has started on them as well with everything, the ideal man and what he's supposed to be like. So I think that that's a fantastic point. If that's what you say to your body every day, well, I'd be like, okay, whatever.
Yeah. Well, it's not always easy. It needs to be believable. So I think that the first thing that you do is just feel gratitude as you wake up in your bed. Don't even open your eyes. Just sit there and think about how comfortable you are in the bed that you're in, the mattress. Then feel gratitude for the fact that you can feel your legs and feel warmth through your skin. And by the time you hit the mirror, pick something you mean. I really like my hands. I have beautiful hands. If you can get honest with yourself about that, you can expand it from there and start changing the long-held and entrained belief system that you have about it, to the point that you're looking yourself full frontal and completely in the raw going, I love this body. I love myself. I love my life. And you really do affect upon the cells, the intelligent energy that makes up what we see in the mirror every day.
I'm working on that. The other thing I'm trying to remember to do every morning is to look in the mirror and say, I love you. So that's been a big to-do. Now, we have another question for you on chat. Now, this is from Positive Attitude, but he or she might have not been on because you don't do readings over the air. But could you maybe offer, they say that they have arthritis in their right hand. Can you maybe offer some emotional or mental things that might have caused that, and maybe something that they could maybe want to examine?
Absolutely. This is going to touch a little bit on some of the work that Louise Hay has done and those that are similar in her understanding. She worked with metaphysical principles. The right side of the body is masculine energy. There may be relationships around rigid thinking from the father, a competitive brother, a feeling that as soon as this particular individual felt that they wanted to move into action about something, that they didn't have what it took to get all the way into the follow through, because energy runs down our appendages, particularly in action and connection with others, in engagement. It runs from where it originates in mind and in inspiration and wisdom, down our shoulders, and it is meant to terminate out through those hands by engaging and business deals, or it could be artistry. It could be a creative venture that is going to require flexibility and movement. And if there's fear that is stifling in that hand, if there is a concern that the world won't be receptive to your level of engagement, you're offering your creativity, you can literally dam your own self up with the way that the energy terminates instead in the wrist and somewhere in the fingers and the digits, rather than running all the way through and out into the energy field of those around you that you're meant to engage with. I love to be able to work with the physical piece too. And so when we start to work with kind of a physiological blend of expansive understanding with asking some of these questions, we find that the energy moves a lot quicker. I would have a client, because as a clinical aromatherapist, which I find to be body, mind, and spirit, Epsom salts is a wonderful, wonderful magical tool for being able to help the body terminate energy that's been stuck. And for hands and feet and ankles and lower legs, I found that it's been tremendously beneficial. So I would ask the client to consider, why don't you go ahead and soak the hand and the wrist in some Epsom salts, give it about 20 minutes and allow some of that energy to drain out, allow some of the toxicity in the limbs and the joints to also be able to follow suit, because it is layered. It is definitely mental, emotional, as well as physical. And ask yourself some of these questions. Where do I feel stuck in my engagement? Where do I feel stuck in the support of my masculine energy, or people that are in my life manifest as male, dominant masculine support systems? And then see what answers come up for you, because you definitely know the answer. You may just have not known what questions to ask up until this point.
Excellent answer. That was great. Thank you. Well, thanks, positive attitude. I would say also keep up the positive attitude. That would help. Now, Tatiana, talk about, at the end of our session, you did a Talking to My Higher Self, I believe it was a flower essence mixture.
Yeah.
Can you, because you've mentioned aromatherapy, but that's different. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that is that you do?
Sure. I think Dr. Bach is the most well-known in bringing the concept of flower essences to the world, and he's been tremendously successful with that. Unlike essential oils, which is the volatile properties that are extracted usually through distillation, and in earlier days through a process called enfleurage, where we're literally extracting the volatile oils, flower essences are the soulful, lighter, spiritual etheric properties that the flower presents. And those that are attuned to being able to read the energy of flowers, and I have some skill in that, but I would certainly give way to those that really do specialize in that. The Reiki master I studied under in the south of France many, many, many years ago had an affinity for the land and very much a beautiful communication with the wildflowers that grew in the south of France. And she asked the permission, always there's permission, and the cooperation of the surrounding wildflowers if they would like to be part of the healing regimen that she was putting out into the world. And there was such a beautiful energy that each of these flowers brought to the table that she was able to kind of, through divine data download, communicate with the flowers. What do you represent? What does your subtle energies bring to the table? This particular flower, because of its shape, because of its color, because of where it grows close to the ground, feels like it has to do with compassion, with moving forward and letting go. And she would pick up on each of these in a very similar way that Dr. Bach did. And when they are harvested and they go through a very specific process of allowing the essence of that flower to be melded into a pure water and then divided in a homeopathic way many, many times over, so that the intrinsic energy or the soul properties of that flower is available. I can then work with that as a tool. And at the end of session, I always want to send my clients out very supported, both with high energy water that has been blessed and has had very positive words charged and infused in it. And then I question and I ask whether or not the client is going to be further supported by the flower essences. And without fail, again, using hands and scanning and picking up on their energy, as soon as we know what flower essences are called for, and I read what the explanations of what these particular flower essences are offering them in the mental, emotional, as well as physical way, it is always spot on for where we left in the session and what supports they were looking for moving forward. And it's just very exciting.
And so when you create a tincture and you give that to the client, then so that's infusing the energy that they would benefit from after the session. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. The flower essence is contained in that bottle in kind of a homeopathic remedy, and then it goes directly into the highly charged water so that they can feel supported and grounded as they are leaving after session.
So if someone wanted to see you, you mentioned, you wouldn't diagnose, say if someone had Lyme disease, but are you basically open for anyone that maybe has some stuff going on, whether it's emotional and they're aware of it, or if they've suffered trauma, or if it's just like, you know what, my knees don't feel good? Can you pretty much handle that and work with anyone and are open for that?
Absolutely. Anyone who is really recognizing that they know deeply that the answers are within them, and they're just looking for a little more information, another way of viewing the way it's manifesting in their body, stepping more into their power and saying, okay, so far what I've done hasn't worked because I've seen myself as a victim of, or in battle against, or at war with whatever their symptomology happens to be. And they really want to see what is my body trying to tell me. When they show up, we can do all kinds of things. I've worked with those that have been third generation Holocaust survivors, those that have been ravaged with cancer, certainly Lyme's disease, and just clients that say, you know what, I'm not happy in my career. I feel like half of me shut down, and I really want to find the more. When you're ready and you show up, I can show up for you as well.
I used to get the flu like clockwork. I could tell you I'd get it around Thanksgiving or end of November, early December. And when I quit my job and started being my own boss, I don't get the flu anymore. And the other thing, when I lived in Los Angeles, and I would say I probably for most of my life, unfortunately, I would say I had a low-grade depression. And, until I figured out what caused that, I got sick a lot. But I rarely get sick anymore. And if I do, it's for a brief period. So I absolutely believe in what you do and believe that whatever is going on in here is definitely manifested in the body. Now, Tatiana, there are a couple questions I like to ask each guest because the passion that drives me to do this show is to get people to work with you or someone, whatever it's going to be best for them, but is to do something. So right now, there's probably someone listening that's struggling. What would you say to them?
Well, we're all struggling with something. So the first thing that I would say is you're in really good company. We are absolutely all experiencing some level of challenge, and it is simply inherent to being human on this planet and here to experience soul growth. So if you're struggling with something within your body, talk to your body and respect that your body is your partner. Respect that your body is not your enemy. Respect that it's not a stranger. Respect that it is listening to you at all times, and it's divinely established to function for you, serve you, and be your greatest ally. If there's aspects of your life that feel out of balance, recognize that we can always stop where we are and start all over again. Just as Julie said, the flu hit once a year, and it would be my assessment very loosely to say the body was saying, I'm not really happy doing this. And the emotional field that I'm carrying on a consistent basis was wearing me down. And at least once a year, I'm going to shut down because I'm not granted the opportunity to shut down. Your body's just trying to communicate to you. Mm-hmm. Your level of depression, your level of engagement in the world, when it's not satisfying, when there's not enough joy, it's because it's time for a shift. And so step into a place where recognizing the answers are all around you. And as soon as you're open to that, you will find that the answers are directed right into your path.
Now, I'm also about getting off the couch. So what one step can people take this moment, later tonight, or tomorrow morning to reawaken their brilliance?
Love, love, love yourself. And ask for yourself to continue to reveal what it wants next. What is the next level of your growth? Have that crazy communication, be the person driving down the road talking to themselves, standing in front of the mirror. Get back in communication with you, because as soon as you open the doors to asking yourself who you really are, what you want, and what's next, it is a beautiful ride from there. It's just a matter of being open to that.
Now, Tatiana, do you have any questions or have any classes coming up or workshops? I'm not sure if you're doing anything in the area that you'd like to tell people about.
There are some things that are in formation, but actually right now I am writing a book that I believe is just going to be another offering in the world that allows many of those that have experienced things that felt kind of beyond their control, and very often energy work can feel beyond our control, and the influences that come and go with that. The book is going to probably be available no later than the end of this year. And as classes and the need for classes come up, I do plan to put those online. So just keep your eye out on healthehealer.org, and also my website, nurturing-hands.com.
Excellent. And I want to remind our listeners who are in the Raleigh-Durham Triangle area, the first Thrive event is next Tuesday. You can still get tickets. It's on holistic weight loss. We have extraordinary experts who are going to teach you lots of good things if getting healthy and losing weight is one of your goals. I'm really excited. We've put together a wonderful panel, and you'll learn a lot. Like, for instance, the energy driving you to overeat. We'll learn an acupuncture spot to help you reduce hunger. So if you're interested, go to reawakenyourbrilliance.com, and we've got a link right there on the front page, and you can sign up. We'd love to have you. Thank you, Tatiana. We appreciate your time.
Thank you,
have a good
Julie.
night, everyone. Bye now.
Good night.
You are tuned to Reawaken Your Brilliance on the Nissan Communications Network. Listen to some of our other programs like Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan Sundays 9 a.m. to noon. Attitude for Business with Mike Sink Mondays 3 to 3:30 p.m. Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon Mondays 8 to 9 p.m. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch the program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it at www.nissancommunications.com.